What are the four basic types of tissue? Epithelial, connective, muscle, nervous. Epithelial tissue function. Covers body surfaces, lines body cavities, and serves as a protective barrier. Connective tissue function. Connects other tissues to each other and serves to bind and support body parts. Muscle tissue function. Moves the body and its content by contraction. Nervous tissue function. Receives stimuli from the internal or external environment and communicates through electrical impulses with the rest of the body. What are the three main parts every cell has in the human body? Plasma membrane, cytoplasm, and nucleus. Plasma membranes. Made of a phospholipid bilayer embedded with proteins, is selectively permeable, allowing only certain molecules in and out. Nucleus. Control center of the cell that contains DNA. Rough endoplasmic reticulum. A membrane-enclosed cellular organelle with ribosomes attached to its outer surface. Smooth endoplasmic reticulum. Contains no ribosomes on its cytoplasmic surface and synthesizes carbohydrates, lipids, steroid hormones, and detoxifies chemicals. Ribosomes. Site of protein synthesis. Golgi apparatus complex. Manufacturing and shipping department of the cell, site where proteins are modified, packaged, and transported to where they are needed. Lysosomes. An organelle containing digestive enzymes necessary for cell metabolism. Mitochondria. Powerhouse of the cell, organelle that is the site of ATP production. Lateral plane. Imaginary line that divides the body away from the midline less than midline of body greater than. Medial plane. Toward the midline of the body greater than midline of body less than. Posterior. Toward the back of the body. Anterior. Toward the front of the body. Sagittal plane. A vertical plane that divides the body into right and left parts. Frontal plane. Divides body into anterior and posterior sides. Transverse plane. Divides the body into superior and inferior parts. Superior. Higher on the body, nearer to the head. Inferior. Lower on the body, farther from the head. Respiratory system function. Bring oxygen to and eliminates carbon dioxide from the blood gas exchange. Ventilation. Movement of air in and out of the lungs. Upper respiratory tract. Nose, nasal cavity, paranasal sinuses, oral cavity, pharynx, glottis, and larynx. Lower respiratory tract. Trachea, lungs, bronchi, bronchioles, and alveoli. How many lobes does the right lung have? 3 lobes. How many lobes does the left lung have? 2 lobes. Pleura. Double-layered membrane surrounding each lung. What cavity do the lungs lie in? Pleural cavity. Nose and nasal cavity. Warms, moistens, and filters air as it is inhaled. Pharynx. Throat, passageway for food to the esophagus and air to the larynx. Glottis. Air passage from the pharynx to the larynx. Epiglottis. A flap of tissue that seals off the windpipe and prevents food from entering. Larynx. Voice box, passageway for air moving from pharynx to trachea, contains vocal cords. Trachea. The windpipe, a passage through which air moves in the respiratory system, beginning of lower respiratory tract. Bronchi. Two short branches located at the lower end of the trachea that carry air into the lungs. Bronchioles. Airways in the lungs that lead from the bronchi to the alveoli. Alveoli. Terminal air sacs located in the lower lungs that are the site of gas exchange between the respiratory and circulatory systems. Gases exchanged via passive diffusion. What monitors the levels of CO2 and pH in the blood? The medulla oblongata and the pons. Does an increased level of C2 make the blood acidic or basic? Makes the blood more acidic because of the increase of H+ ions. What stimulates inhalation? An increase of C2 in the blood monitored by the pons and medulla oblongata. Inhalation. The act of taking in air as the diaphragm contracts and pulls downward. Increase of thoracic cavity and lung volume. Alveolar pressure decreases. Pressure gradient outside is high and inside lungs is low, therefore air flows into lungs down the pressure gradient. Exhalation. The passive part of the breathing process in which the diaphragm and the intercostal muscles relax, forcing air out of the lungs. Alveolar pressure increases. Pressure gradient outside is low and inside the lungs is high, therefore air flows out of lungs down the pressure gradient. Tidal volume. Amount of air that moves in and out of the lungs during a normal breath. Total lung capacity. Amount of gas in the lungs after a maximum inspiration or deep breath, also vital capacity plus residual volume. Vital capacity. The total volume of air that can be exhaled after maximal inspiration or deep breath. Residual volume. The air that remains in the lungs after maximal expiration. Atelectasis. Collapsed lung. Incomplete expansion of alveoli due to sides of alveoli sticking together from watery fluid with adhesive properties. Surfactant. Lipid mixture secreted by cells that tends to reduce the surface tension of a liquid, thus preventing the sides of the alveoli from sticking together and averting atelectasis. Two respiratory characteristics that lung compliance depends on. Is a measure of the ease of expanding the lungs, depends on the elasticity of the lung tissue and the alveolar surface tension. Emphysema. Destruction of elastic lung tissue resulting in abnormally large lung expansion with poor recoil and increased residual volume. Basically, lungs can't push air out, exhale, so left with extra residual air. This increases the ability for lungs to expand, which is high lung compliance but not good. Asthma. Episodes of breathing difficulty due to narrowed or obstructed airways interferes with the ability for lungs to expand, resulting in low lung compliance. Bronchitis. Inflammation of the bronchi with partial obstruction of bronchi due to excessive mucus secretion interferes with the ability for lungs to expand, resulting in low lung compliance. Cystic fibrosis. A recessive gene mutation that causes the normally slippery mucus secreted in the lungs to become thick and sticky. This mucus can clog airways, leading to severe breathing problems and increased susceptibility to bacterial infections. Cardiovascular circulatory system is responsible for the movement of blood and lymph around the body, which permits nutrient distribution, waste removal, communication, and protection. Myocardium. Cardiac tissue of the heart. Pericardium. Membranous sac enclosing the heart. Atria of the heart are located superiorly and are the receiving chambers of the heart. Ventricles of the heart are located inferiorly and are the pumping chambers of the heart. Pulmonary system. Right side of the heart that pumps deoxygenated blood from the heart towards the lungs. Systemic system. Left side of the heart that receives oxygenated blood from the lungs and pumps it toward the rest of the body parts. Arteries carry oxygenated blood away from the heart to the tissues of the body, contain a thick layer of smooth muscle and are more muscular to help transport oxygen-rich blood efficiently to the tissues, would not collapse if blood flow stopped because of thick muscular layer. Capillaries. Microscopic blood vessels that are only 1 cell thick and facilitate the exchange of gas and nutrients between the respiratory system and cardiovascular system with the alveoli of the lungs. Veins carry deoxygenated blood back from the tissues of the body back to the heart, are less muscular but contain valves to help keep blood flowing towards the direction of the heart, would collapse if blood flow stops. Plasma. Liquid part of blood that contains water, immune proteins, and other nutrients. Erythrocytes. Red blood cells that contain hemoglobin and carry oxygen. Hemoglobin. Iron-containing protein in red blood cells that carries oxygen for delivery to cells. Leukocytes. White blood cells that function in the immune response and defend the body against disease. Platelets are responsible for the blood's clotting system. Lymph vessels. Vessels that receive lymph from the lymph capillaries and circulate it to the lymph nodes are thin-walled and contain one-way valves to maintain flow in one direction only. Lymphatic capillaries are entwined with cardiovascular capillaries and absorb excess tissue fluid and blood plasma that leaks from capillaries. Lymph. A colorless fluid containing white blood cells which bathes the tissues and drains through the lymphatic system into the bloodstream. Lymph nodes. Small organs distributed throughout the body concentrated in the neck, armpit, and groin that filter lymph fluid and contain lymphocytes. Lymphocytes. A type of white blood cell that make antibodies. Antibodies. Proteins that attach to antigens marking pathogens for destruction by other cells. Cardiac cycle. A complete heartbeat consisting of systole and diastole, contraction and relaxation of both atria and both ventricles. Systole. Contraction of the atria followed by the ventricles. Diastole. when the heart chambers relax and refill. Sinoatrial node, known as the pacemaker, located in the upper wall of the right atrium, sends electrical impulses from the right to left atria, causing them to contract and forces blood into the ventricles. Atrioventricular node, located at the bottom of the right atrial wall and travels along the atrioventricular bundle down the right and left branches in the septum and finally along the Purkinje fibers in the walls of the ventricles, causing the filled ventricles to contract. What part of the brain and hormones control the heart? The cardiac center of the brain and the hormones epinephrine and norepinephrine. Pulmonary circulation carries deoxygenated blood from the tissues to the heart and then to the lungs to oxygenate it and then back to the heart. Superior vena cava, right atrium, tricuspid valve, right ventricle, pulmonary semilunar valve, pulmonary artery, lungs, pulmonary veins, left atrium. Systemic circulation. Oxygenated blood from the heart is pumped to the tissues: left atrium, bicuspid mitral valve, left ventricle, aortic semilunar valve, aorta, tissues. Tricuspid AV valve, between right atrium and right ventricle. Bicuspid AV valve, between the left atrium and left ventricle. Pulmonary semilunar valve, located between the right ventricle and the pulmonary artery. Aortic semilunar valve, located between the left ventricle and the aorta. How is blood pressure measured and what is the average reading? Blood pressure is measured in millimeters of mercury and expressed as the maximum pressure over the minimum pressure with an expected average reading of 127 millimeters Hg. Atherosclerosis, a disease in which plaque builds up and causes blockage within your arteries. Embolus, a piece of plaque or clotted blood traveling through vessels. Stroke, damage to the brain from interruption of its blood supply. Myocardial infarction, heart attack, when the flow of blood to a part of the heart muscle is blocked, causing cardiac muscle tissue to die. Central nervous system consists of the brain and spinal cord. Peripheral nervous system consists of the extensive network of spinal nerves carrying sensory or afferent information towards the spinal cord and brain and motor or efferent information away from the brain and spinal cord. Somatic nervous system is voluntary and controls the skeletal muscles of the body. Autonomic nervous system is involuntary and controls the visceral or cardiac muscles of organ systems like the digestive system and cardiovascular systems without our conscious planning. Neurons, a specialized cell transmitting nerve impulses, a nerve cell. Dendrites are receptor extensions that receive signals from other neurons. Axon is a long singular tail-like extension which transmits signals to other cells. Myelin sheath covers the axon of some neurons and helps speed neural impulses. Synapse is a structure that allows neurons to pass signals on to other neurons, muscles, or glands. Sensory neurons carry afferent impulses towards the CNS. Motor neurons carry afferent impulses from the CNS out to muscles. Fibrous tissue. Tissue that muscles are made out of has the unique ability to shorten or contract to move body parts and then to relax to their original length. Myofibrils. Microscopic protein filaments that make up muscle cells. There are two types, actin and myosin. Actin. Thin contractile protein filament. Myosin. Thick contractile protein filament. Sarcomere is a repeating contractile unit of skeletal muscle that consists of the main protein filaments actin and myosin. When does muscle contraction occur? When the thin actin filaments slide past the thicker or contract, the actin and myosin filaments do not shorten themselves but shorten the length of the sarcomere by sliding past one another. Amyotrophic lateral sclerosis/Lou Gehrig disease. A disease where the motor neurons degenerate and die, leading to loss of voluntary muscle movement. Muscular dystrophy. Group of genetic disorders in which abnormal genes interfere with the production of proteins needed to form healthy muscles. While the nerves are not affected, muscles progressively degenerate and weaken. Both voluntary and involuntary muscles are compromised. Estrogen. Secreted by ovaries and promotes the development of female sex characteristics, is a steroid hormone. Epinephrine. Secreted by the adrenal gland and regulates heart rate and blood pressure. Non-steroid hormone. Follicle-stimulating hormone. Secreted by the anterior pituitary gland and stimulates development of eggs in ovaries and sperm in testes. Non-steroid hormone. Glucagon. Secreted by the pancreas, triggers liver to convert hepatic glycogen stores into glucose and release glucose into the blood. Non-steroid hormone. Growth hormone. Secreted by the anterior pituitary and stimulates tissue growth. Non-steroid hormone. Inhibiting hormones. Secreted by the hypothalamus and restricts the production of certain hormones. Non-steroid hormone. Insulin. Secreted by the pancreas and is hormone that triggers the influx of glucose into cells, thus lowering blood glucose levels. Non-steroid hormone. Luteinizing hormone. Secreted by the anterior pituitary and triggers ovulation in ovaries and production of testosterone by testes. Non-steroid hormone. Melatonin. Secreted by the pineal gland and plays a role in maintaining circadian rhythms. Non-steroid hormone. Parathyroid hormone. Secreted by the parathyroid gland and elevates plasma calcium level. Non-steroid hormone. Hormones. Releasing hormones. Secreted by the hypothalamus and stimulate the production of certain hormones. Non-steroid hormone. Outer renal cortex and inner renal medulla. Two major regions of the kidney. Renal cortex. Outer region of the kidney. Renal medulla. Inner portion of the kidney. Nephron. Functional unit of the kidney. Glomerulus is a network of capillaries where blood pressure pushes water, salt, glucose, amino acids, and urea from the blood. Filtrate. materials including water that lead the blood through the walls of the glomerular capillaries to enter the Bowman's capsule. Bowman's capsule. A cup-like structure that surrounds and collects filtrate from the glomerulus. Proximal tubule. The first location where glucose and other useful solutes are reabsorbed back into the blood through the walls of surrounding capillaries. It connects the Bowman's capsule to the loop of Henle. Loop of Henle. Tubule that connects from proximal to distal. Distal tubule. Between the loop of Henle and the collecting duct, selective reabsorption and secretion occur here, most notably to regulate reabsorption of water and sodium. Tubular reabsorption. Process of reclaiming water and solutes from the tubular fluid and returning them to the blood. Renal pelvis. The center of the kidney where urine collects before moving to the ureter. Ureter. The duct that delivers urine from the kidney to the bladder. 1. The kidneys filter metabolic waste from the blood. 2. The kidneys regulate electrolyte and fluid balance in the blood. 3. The influence on fluid balance by the kidneys affect blood volume in the cardiovascular system, resulting in changes in blood flow rate and blood pressure. 3 primary functions of the kidneys and the urinary system. The nitrogenous wastes, urea, uric acid, and creatinine. 3 metabolic byproducts that must be kept at low levels in the blood are renin, an enzyme released by the kidney when reduced blood pressure is detected by baroreceptors in aorta and carotid arteries. Angiotensin II, a secretion that acts to restore blood volume and blood pressure by constricting blood vessels, stimulating thirst, and stimulating production of aldosterone and antidiuretic hormone. Aldosterone is a hormone secreted by the adrenal gland that increases reabsorption of sodium ions. Antidiuretic hormone, a secretion from the pituitary gland that increases the amount of water able to be reabsorbed from the collecting duct, increases blood pressure. The structure of the bone gives it strength, the ability to grow and repair itself, and the ability to serve as a reservoir of minerals and salts needed elsewhere in the body. The bone's dynamic nature is possible because it's living tissue containing cells, collagen matrix, and minerals. Bone structure and function. Osteocytes are star-shaped cells that maintain and are able to sense physical stresses. Osteoblasts, bone-building cells. Osteoclasts, cells that break down bone. Mineral resorption. The osteoclast's removal of calcium from the bone so it can enter the bloodstream. Osteoporosis, a disease that causes brittle, fragile bones as a result of depleted amounts of minerals like calcium. Mineralization, deposition of hydroxyapatite by osteoblasts onto the highly organized collagen matrix in bone. Collagen, tough, flexible connective tissue that gives bone its flexibility, found in parts of the body like the ear. Brittle bone disease, due to a genetic defect in the collagen matrix and causes bones to break easily, deficiency of cartilage. Lamellae, concentric layers of the bone matrix, like the growth rings of a tree, but the bone instead. Lacunae, microscopic pits in bones that contain osteocytes and connect each other within an ostein by way of canaliculi. Canaliculi. Microscopic canals in ossified bone. Ostine. A structural unit of compact bone consisting of a central canal surrounded by concentric cylindrical lamellae of matrix. Red bone marrow. Produces red and white blood cells and platelets. Yellow bone marrow. Fatty tissue found in the medullary cavity of most adult long bones. Long bones. Bones of the arms and legs that are longer than they are wide. Short bones. Bones of the wrist, ankle, and the patella. Flat bones. Bones of the ribs, shoulder blades, pelvis, and skull. Irregular bones. Bones of the vertebrae and face. Osteoarthritis. Inflammation of the bone and joint. Rheumatoid arthritis. A chronic autoimmune disorder in which the joints and some organs of other body systems are attacked rather than wear and tear of the joint. Epiphyseal plate. Hyaline cartilaginous area at the ends of long bones where lengthwise growth takes place in the immature skeleton. Axial skeleton. The portion of the skeleton consisting of the skull, ribs, sternum, and spinal column. Appendicular skeleton. Bones of the limbs and limb girdles that are attached to the axial skeleton. Volkmann's canals. Channels lying at right angles to the central canal connecting blood and nerve supply of the periosteum to that of the Haversian canal. Tendon. Attaches muscle to bone. Ligament. Connects bone to bone. Positive feedback. A feedback mechanism resulting in the amplification or growth of the output signal breaks down the homeostasis of the system, example, childbirth, blood clotting, and breastfeeding. Thyroid hormone. Secreted by the thyroid gland and regulates growth, development, and metabolic rate. Oxytocin. Secreted by the posterior pituitary and stimulates uterine contractions during childbirth. Non-steroid hormone. Testosterone. Secreted by testes and promotes the development of male sex characteristics, is a steroid hormone. Steroid hormones are derived from cholesterol and are lipid-soluble or fat-soluble, which allows them to pass easily through cell membranes and nuclear membranes, examples, testosterone and estrogen. Non-steroid hormones. Receptor sites are on the outer surface of the target cell's membrane, are water-soluble and cannot pass through the phospholipids of the cell membrane, bind to cell surface receptors, proteins embedded in the cell membrane. Thymus. An immune organ located near the heart and is the site of T-cell maturation and is larger in children and adolescents. Monomer. A simple compound whose molecules can join together to form polymers. Nucleotide. A building block of DNA consisting of a 5-carbon sugar covalently bonded to a nitrogenous base and a phosphate group via hydrogen bonds. How are nitrogenous bases bonded together? 23 pairs. How many chromosomes are in each cell? Genome. The complete set of genetic information in a cell. Gene. is a segment of DNA on a chromosome, is a unit of heredity and codes for a protein of functional RNA molecule. Codon. Triplets of nucleotides that each code for an amino acid. Amino acids are monomers that make up proteins. Genetic code. The set of 64 codons that specify the 20 amino acids. mRNA. Messenger type of RNA that carries instructions from DNA in the nucleus to the ribosome. tRNA reads the message of nucleic acids or nucleotides and translate it into proteins or amino acids. Chromatid. One of the two duplicates of a chromosome formed during the cell cycle. What are the four basic